Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Welcome back to the Daily Dose of Doom and Gloom, the condensed weekend version, because we all got better things to do. Now, before we talk about World War III, I need to apologize on behalf of my Western Canadian brethren for what you're seeing behind me and possibly outside. You're probably seeing a thick haze of smoke depending on your proximity to ground zero, but there are massive fires that are raging right now in northern Saskatchewan and northern Alberta that is sending toxic levels of smoke all the way down to Texas and to the East Coast. In fact, in Denver today, they claim to have the worst air quality in the world, but I'm guessing that it's not quite as bad as ground zero. This is firesmoke.ca. It gives you very accurate projections on which way the wind's going to be blowing at any given time and how thick and how bad the air quality is going to be. And I can tell you that this is a very good website. You can predict basically with 90% certainty out to around 24 hours when the brunt of it is going to be coming your way. And it is very, very nasty. So finally, a good reason to have a respirator. You know, we're batting for the cycle. We got pandemics, we got world wars, we got the prospect of a nuclear war, we got civil unrest and tear gas, and we got wildfire smoke. We're batting for the cycle in the 2020s. I say, if you have children between the ages of 5 and 15, understand what they've been normalized and acclimated to in just the past 3 years. We're talking about civil unrest. We're talking about World War III angst and nuclear angst. We're talking about climate chaos. We are talking about, what is the other one that I'm forgetting about? The wildfire smoke. I guess that would be the one, and the pandemics and the lockdowns and the whole 9 yards. All that stuff has been normalized. And that's just crazy to think about. You know, it's one thing to have those things, one of those things in every decade that defines a generation, but now it's just one thing after another, and we haven't even hit the real financial crisis yet. Anyways, guys, a brief synopsis of what we're going to talk about today. Zelensky hasn't been in Ukraine since the attack on the Kremlin, since the so-called assassination attempt. Isn't that a mysterious correlation? I'm not saying that it's causation, I'm just saying it's correlation, okay? Another correlation is the Ukrainian commander, Valery Zaluzhny's whereabouts. Now, according to him, his telegram anyways, he just had a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a phone call, in fact, a secret phone call, they're calling it, that apparently he had to make public because people were starting to question whether or not he was alive and killed in one of these hypersonic missile airstrikes, one of the 13, probably 14 by the time this video is complete, airstrikes that have been waged on the Ukrainian city of Kiev by Russia so far this month. Is he in fact alive? Is he dead? I mean, you just never know. I'm leaning towards he's probably alive. This is probably just all speculation and hearsay, but it's strange because you got to think, would they let the people know if that happened? Think about the blow to morale that would be to hear that the top guy was taken out while Zelensky is out of town, while Bakhmut has fallen. And apparently this counteroffensive is nowhere to be seen. And you got everybody talking about delivering F-16s. Now, I'm going to give you my theory as to what's going on in general before we talk about, you know, the whole 9 yards here. And that is basically that you need to understand that they're going to lie to the population. I mean, I've been talking about this since day one, since I made the normalcy bias video for you guys who have been here that long. Before the war started, when we said that it was going to start and that the normalcy bias was thick and that the Ukrainians were telling their population you don't have to leave because remember they needed all the able-bodied males to stay in the country under martial law and conscript them to fight in the war, so they didn't want everybody to rush out before the war started. So they said, don't worry, the Russians aren't going to attack. The exact same thing is going to happen right till the end, and in fact that same recipe is going to be served to us here in the West. They are going to lie to us. But they're such good liars that everybody's going to fall for it, which is why if you're a thinking person, you're always going to have a head start here. You just got to do a little bit more research. That doesn't mean go off the deep end and down every rabbit hole you find. It just means keep an eye out, be skeptical, be critical, and you're likely going to be ahead of the curve. But I'm guessing that they've realized that they've lost the eastern part of Ukraine. They may still continue with this counteroffensive. I mean, the Russians seem to be concerned about the Zaporozhye region. They have vacated the staff and the personnel, all of the non-essential staff, if you will, from the nuclear power plant. They've evacuated a lot of the population out of those regions, anticipating a major Ukrainian counteroffensive, which of course is aimed at targeting Melitopol and cutting off that land bridge to Crimea. They're going to unload on the Crimean Kerch Bridge with their long-range missiles if they can get them by Russian defense. Maybe they're going to wait for the F-16s for that. Who knows? But I'm thinking, my hunch is, my intuition is that the war is actually lost. Okay, now, I'm not saying this is a guarantee, but if you look at what else is happening on the rest of the battlefield, the northern border of Ukraine is being heavily fortified by Belarus right now. They've been doing this for some time, but they've recently committed to putting dragon's teeth on the border. These are anti-tank barriers, okay? Poland has done the same thing around Belarus. You can see what is happening. They got HIMARS on the Kaliningrad border. They're putting in, what are those, hedgehogs, anti-tank obstacles, barriers along the Polish-Belarusian border. On the Ukrainian border, they're putting all sorts of, they're blowing bridges, they're mining everything, they're preparing for the war. So that's where the war is going to come in the future. All countries in that region are preparing for the war to spill over because maybe, just maybe, we've lost, and this image here, this iconic image now, which is being circulated, is going to signal the beginning of the end. Now, if you are somebody who has been exposed to a lot of both sides of this argument, you will probably come to the conclusion that it's not Russia's intent to go in and conquer all of Europe. Maybe you could make the argument that they want to take the Baltics. Maybe you can make the argument that they want to pay back Poland at some point in time. You definitely can make the argument that they want to maybe take the western part of Ukraine, but even that would be a lot of baggage. You know, that would be an endless state of asymmetrical conflict. They would likely never get the whole situation under control. There's not the same level of pro-Russian sentiment in certain regions that there are in places like Odessa and the 4 annexed territories where they can kind of hold down without chaos, total chaos erupting right away. But it appears as though that the West is preparing for the war to spill over. Now, remember what they said. Remember what our government said. They said if Russia wins the war, it's World War III. What does Russia say? If we lose Crimea, it's World War III. World War III is just synonymous with nuclear weapons, basically, at this point. Now, Ben Wallace, the UK Defense Secretary, comes out today and he says conflict is coming. We need to boost military spending ASAP. How they couldn't think about this is just astonishing. When you have these record rates of inflation, the UK they're taking it up all holes right now. Okay, I feel sorry for people in the UK, but man, you guys are going to be eating a crap sandwich for many, many years to come. Anyways, they're saying that they're going to war with China and Russia by 2030. Good news for preppers, if you believe Ben Wallace. We have U.S. generals saying that the war between China, Taiwan, and the United States is coming by 2025. 2027 is the ballpark estimate. So I would say, you know, if this thing doesn't blow up right away, we hopefully have a couple years to get everything squared away. Do not trust the media to tell you when shit's going to get bad. You got Zelensky, who's outside the country for whatever reason. You can make the argument that he's doing the whole thing. He's trying to get the weapons. He's doing all that diplomacy type stuff. But it just seems, the timing seems weird. Where's Zaluzny? All these airstrikes happening. The fall of Bakhmut. It doesn't look good, is all I'm saying. Now, the Ukrainians are spinning this, as they typically do. And, you know, leave it to war, to the most eloquent word games. And these are some memes. This is how it started. Do you remember with the helmets? This is how it's going. We've been saying for months that they're going to get fighter jets. Any support that you can imagine that the West is going to put into this fight right now, including troops and boots on the ground, they're going to do it. They are going to do it. This was a funny one. This is Newsweek. Very, very pro-Ukrainian website. I've try to view as much Ukrainska Pravda as I do Russia Pravda. I try to get all sides of the story. But this was funny because these two stories were right back to back. This one says Ukraine makes tactically significant gains in Bakhmut battle. They claim that they've now gained the initiative, right? Because they've lost the city. Think about that wording, gain the initiative. What that means is that you are the one who determines where the attack is going to come from. So if the Russians won in Bakhmut and they're celebrating because they won in Bakhmut and they're taking a break in their newly liberated territory, all that Ukraine has to do to be taking the initiative is throw a rock at Bakhmut. Hey, we have the initiative, basically, So, I mean, that's just a way of a very euphemistic spin on we lost. Ukraine prepares war, allies for disappointment. So, tactically significant gains, preparing war allies for disappointment. Now, apparently Zelensky's been given an ultimatum, and this is just rumor, so don't take it to the bank. Either you do this counteroffensive immediately and it's successful, or you are going to lose our support and you are on your own. So, something to think about. What other memery do we have here? Oh, this one's interesting. Yeah, this one's open to interpretation. Is this a pro-Russian meme or a pro-Ukrainian meme? Bakhmut, the size of it, it's brushing up against all the Western countries. Is this like the Russian distortion of the Russian perception of this victory, this Pyrrhic victory, or is it vice versa? Is this the West overblowing, the Russian? Anyways, you guys can let me know how you want to interpret that one. Ukraine seizes tactical initiative. That's what they call it, seizing the tactical initiative. So losing a battle is now called seizing the tactical initiative. That is genius. They must have people that they pay to write this stuff. This is Zaluzhny. I'm just trying to see if I'm in the right chronology of my stories here. This is, according to Twitter, I don't know how true, that you can never know what's on Twitter with deepfakes and AI. You just never know what's real. But apparently he was swimming. Now, he missed a very important NATO conference that was the teleconference. He didn't have to go there. He could have done it from the comfort of his hypersonic missile-proof bunker, but he didn't, which led some people to believe that maybe this guy is no longer on this astral plane, so to speak. The day after, they released this photo of him swimming and claims that he was at a wedding. Well, why would you miss an important NATO conference while one of the most critical linchpin battles of the war thus far, Bakhmut, you're on the brink of defeat, and supposedly this guy is swimming and going to weddings. Well, today they redeemed themselves. Apparently, Mark Milley had a conversation with him. This is his telegram. Zaluzhny's telegram. I don't think Milley would be party to these types of shenanigans. If he really was gone, maybe they're using AI to communicate with Milley to make, to even fool Milley if he is in fact gone, but maybe we're even reading too deep into this. It's probably just that he's keeping a low profile because of everything that's going on right now, but it's definitely suspicious, and it doesn't inspire confidence for anybody who's paying a lot of attention down there. Okay, we got this iconic image here, the hoisting of the flag. If you're of the pro-Russian crowd, then you're probably celebrating that today. Belarus constructing defensive fortifications. So these are these dragon's teeth. Okay, this is the video. It's very, very short video showing these. Like it's 3 seconds long, so you barely see anything. But just the fact that they're going to that extent is very, very telling for a country that claims to not be party to the conflict. Now, anybody with half a brain knows that Belarus is very much, obviously, a vassal state of Russia in many ways. They are definitely a part of this conflict. Russia is using it as a staging ground to send MiG-31s on bombing raids. So they're as part of the conflict as, Ukraine really has every right to start firing into Belarus, to be brutally honest. The fact that they haven't yet, and these weird set of rules that we've erected around where the Ukrainians can target and where they can't, has made this an incredibly complicated situation, because we're trying to navigate nuclear Armageddon as well as nuclear power plants. And, with all these countries and vassal states, it's just a very weird state of affairs. Here's one for you to chew on. Get a load of this. And this should put it in perspective, okay? We've seen this huge display. Every night, basically, in May, there's been bombardments of Kiev. And this so-called one lone invincible Patriot missile system, apparently Ukraine, in this one defensive volley, they lobbed 6% of the annual production, in 120 seconds, 120 million, $1 million per second was spent on just that one interception. So if this Patriot missile system has been working and is still working, I mean, how long can it possibly last? How much, ammunition are the Ukrainians possibly going to get? Thankfully, they made an accounting error and they get $3 billion worth more supplies. It's not we save $3 billion, they get $3 billion more. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about that again. I talked about that last time. Radioactive cloud. This has been chalked up to be Russian propaganda. They claim that big nuclear-like explosion that wasn't in fact a nuclear explosion, they claim that was actually depleted uranium that kicked up a bunch of toxic, fine radioactive particles into the air that is now en route to Western Europe, and it's going to lead to infertility, cancers, the whole 9 yards. Even though it's probably going to be indistinguishable from the amount of background radiation according to some of the measures that we've seen. And this has kind of somewhat been debunked, but you still got to wonder because the US did go and set up all those radioactive sensors in and around Ukraine, those nuclear sensors, just a few weeks ago. So things are definitely ratcheting up. The war is coming to Poland. Poland knows it. They're putting HIMARS on the Kaliningrad border. They are putting hedgehogs on the border with Belarus. And Belarus is getting ready to be a direct staging ground from the north into Ukraine. I think this is when Russia goes all out. Because remember, it was only the Wagner Group who was predominantly active in an offensive sense, burning through all of their ex-convicts. Imagine being an ex-convict in the Wagner Group who committed all manner of heinous atrocities and you actually survived and now they're going to let you go free? I don't know. Are they really going to let them go free? I don't know. Maybe they made sure that they put all the real bad apples right on the front in the real hot spots. Anyways, going off on tangents here. What time are we at? 17 minutes. Too damn long. I talked about Ben Wallace. Conflict is coming, according to the UK Defense Secretary. I believe it was Patrick Stewart? Can't remember his actual name. The general of the UK Ministry of Defense. They claim that, what were they saying? They were talking last year about going to war with the Russians and how troops needed to be ready to, on a whim, abandon their families and part ways to go to war with Russia. So we know that these guys are preparing for this. They're ready to go all in. Even Kissinger says that he changes his stance now. He flip-flops like a fish out of water. He's saying, yeah, we need Ukraine to join NATO. What's left of Ukraine, of course. Poland is likely going to deploy troops in Ukraine, yada, yada, yada. The NATO is dusting off its Cold War playbook, so they're getting ready for war with the Russians. The Russians are putting their elite units on the border with Ukraine. So you got to ask yourself, why have the Russians not been using these elite units? Why are they just using all these ex-cons? Because they knew this was coming. This is the bigger picture that not a lot of people see. They just see, grenades falling into empty tanks and they think that that's the war. That's not the war. That's just the operations. The strategy is what you got to see, the grander strategy. U.S. involved in assassination of Russian public figures, according to Moscow. That right there is a guarantee that this issue will never be resolved until either Putin is dead or out of power and they put some puppet government into Russia, which is virtually impossible. Or for some reason, they just don't push the button and you have some defector in Russia who refuses to, send the nuclear order on our side. Who knows? But I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. People talk about how, at the last minute, the guy who's going to push the button is going to have a moment of clarity and he's going to defect and he's going to disobey orders from executive orders. But you look at how these guys train. They always train like it's real world. And I was talking to a nuclear missileer, Jay Block, last year on the channel, and he basically said that it is such a motor skill that these people are psychologically vetted to ensure that when the time comes to push the button, the nuclear button I'm talking about, they will do it, no questions asked. And we know from social psychology experiments that it takes a very, very unique person and people who are going to be weeded out psychologically long before they're ever able to be bestowed that kind of responsibility, to be able to refrain from taking those orders. Okay, so yeah, anyways, not really going to talk about this too much. The Kremlin has acknowledged their demographic situation, the fact that their population is declining because they don't have any immigration like they do in the European countries who are in the same demographic situation. People aren't having babies anymore. So this is why, and this is what people don't understand about immigration. I say this as many times as I say it, people don't get it. Immigrants are, they're just dollars to politicians. They're dollars in their votes. Because sure, when they first come, they're probably going to be using social services, welfare systems in order to support themselves. But over time, the idea is that they're taxpayers, they're debt collateral. To pay down the huge debts that Western countries have accumulated, you need taxpayers. If people are not reproducing, who's going to pay the taxes? You need to bring in immigrants. Every immigrant that gets brought in, your collective share of the debt, and this is not like bring all the immigrants across the board. I'm not saying that. You got to look at this from a macroeconomics point of view. When those immigrants come across the border, your debt burden, mathematically, even if it's only by 0.00 cents per immigrant, goes down. Your overall portion of the the national debt goes down. This is the way politicians see it. So your birth certificate, that's like, it's a collateral. So they can take more loans. They can get more money. And they can show people in other countries who they want to borrow money from, don't worry, we're good for it. See, we got these human resources, these cattle who are going to continue to pay into perpetuity for whatever sort of interest you try to charge us. Simonian was sent a mysterious parcel. She's the chief officer at RT, Russia Today, which is state-sponsored, I guess you could say in some roundabout way. It's state-sponsored for sure. Or they're not saying that's anti-Kremlin anyways. But she got sent a very mysterious package. I believe it was a dildo that had explosives in it or something like that. So they're, trying to have a sense of humor in World War III here, I guess. What else do we got going on? This was interesting, I found. Patrushev said this today because, there's all this stuff going on, anniversary of Hiroshima and... was it the anniversary, or it was the G7 who were in Japan, and there's this controversy around Biden not apologizing for nuclear weapons. But he makes an interesting point. He says that Patrushev recalled that in August 1945, without any military necessity, the U.S. dropped A-bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, causing disastrous consequences and the death of a huge number of civilians. Now, Japan is still under military occupation, much like Germany, okay? And I think a lot of Japanese people know it, and they probably still want revenge. But the argument for using nukes on Japan, as far as I understand it, is that if they had to go and do Japan conventionally, the amount of deaths would have been much higher, whereas the nukes, as egregious of an act as you might view this, have being, and the long-lasting effects of it, and just the amount of innocent civilians that died, pretty much mostly innocent civilians, they made the argument that, well, you would likely have seen millions of deaths and not hundreds of thousands if we had fought a conventional war. Like if you had to go island to island fighting the Japanese, it would have been much bloodier, would have been much more drawn out. This prompted the Japanese to surrender. That was it. That was the end of it. Japan got on with it, became one of the most powerful economies in the world. Now, they did say that, or Patrushev says, USA didn't apologize, and they're not going to apologize for what they think they've done. They keep brainwashing the Japanese to make them think that it was the Soviet Union, not the United States, that used nuclear weapons against them. That's what American aid and democracy is all about. Now, he has a point that, the West is trying to get Japan, or trying to vilify Russia for Japan, when that's what happened. the U.S. dropped nukes on Japan, okay? Now, could you imagine a situation where the North Koreans, the Japanese, and the Russians actually got together? It never happened. In a million years, ever happened. But just imagine if, you know, Japan said, we're going to sit this one out. We're going to be neutral. You know, you South Koreans and you Taiwanese, you take care of this. Philippines, you guys take care of this. We're going to sit this one out. Haven't talked about China lately, but you know when the focus is on the war in Ukraine, shit's brewing in the West. North Korea is really irate right now about these exercises that are going on, nuclear exercises, and that's just pretty much become so commonplace that people have just forgot about it, but it's happening right now. China has said that it's absolutely intolerable for military support to Taiwan, explicit military support, which contradicts the United States acknowledgement of the One China policy. So they claim. Anyways, what else haven't we talked about? We talked about the F-16s. They're getting F-16s. They're going to get the whole 9 yards. Whatever they can get away with, they will get. Eventually, they'll probably get the F-35s, the ones they can't sell, and maybe even some F-22s. We got F-22s already in the Baltics ready to go. Look, guys, you know, it could start any day. I mean, they're talking about years. The way these guys do things, and if the Ukrainians are talking about we're going to go on this counteroffensive, it almost makes me think that realistically the best they're going to be able to do is defend the territory they currently have, if that's what they're trying to say. But you never know. You just never know. You never know what's going on, because Russia is the underdog in this when it comes to Russia versus all of NATO. Certainly not the underdog when it comes to just Ukraine. Now, if you're basing it on, you know, the numbers and the military equipment that the media is saying, and but we don't really know what's truly going on. And why would you? Why would you at this point broadcast and say, yeah, we're sending 10 tanks? Like, why would you say that? So that the Russians could just, you know, learn about that? There's a lot of stuff that's being kept secret. Lots of stuff. I'm willing to bet that the amount of support and the numbers, that's all smoke and mirrors. What the public is consuming, I mean, think about it. They have no reason. The only reason why they would say, hey, we're sending Leopard tanks to Russia, the only reason why they would broadcast that is so when the Russians do see a German Leopard tank coming over the horizon, they know it's not Germans, but they're not going to say how many, the exact amount. They're not going to say, and yeah, sure, they're going to say, okay, we're going to send depleted uranium, but they're not going to say the exact amount. You know, they're not going to say whether or not they're going to permit longer range weapons that allow them to fire stuff from Kiev all the way to Crimea. They'll just say, oh, well, we fired it from somewhere else, you know. So we really need to always keep that in mind when we're reading all these numbers that are being listed off, the true numbers. We don't know what the hell is going on there. We do probably know that they probably just want to make it so that they tell the Russians in advance, these are the types of weapons we're sending. But in terms of the actual amounts of those weapons, who knows? Who really knows? Apparently there was a 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate missing from a train in California. So if something go boom in the United States, don't forget about that story, okay? Don't forget about that story. Yeah, so this is Denver claiming that they had the worst air quality in the world. Come up here and say that. It appears as though the Great Lakes seem to prevent, like the smoke doesn't seem to want to go over the Great Lakes region here. Like it kind of goes around it. I don't know if there's some sort of lake effect, weather anomaly that takes place, but everywhere else is getting it. And yeah, check out firesmoke.ca if you want to keep aware of what is coming your way in terms of toxic smoke. It's not looking good. And it sucks because if you're a gardener and you want to get those seeds in the ground, not only is that challenging if you have respiratory issues, but the lack of sunlight makes it very difficult as well. Anyways, guys, I got to bounce. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.